Over the next 10 years, maybe even 5, there's going to be a huge shift with our energy infrastructure, with how electricity is generated to power not just this country, but the world. Because with the electrification of our society, especially the emergence of AI and all these power-hungry data centers everywhere, we obviously need electricity to run everything. And what's happening is that we're realizing that this Green New Deal scam tech has been way oversold. These ugly-ass windmills and the solar panels on the ground just ain't gonna cut it, and they're way more damaging than they are sustainable. And also, oil, gas, coal ain't gonna cut it either. It's a very centralized system. You need the tankers and the pipelines and the refineries and the transmission wires. Let's talk about how many forests are cut down for transmission wires to go hundreds or thousands of miles from the refineries or the windmills or the dams to reach the neighborhood. So what's happening is that countries and corporations realize this, and there is an energy tech race going on between these countries and corporations to develop energy technologies primarily in the realm of nuclear, space-based solar power, and I do eventually think we will see the, whatever you want to call it, free energy, zero-point energy, over unity tech. I do eventually think we will see that emerging into society at a public level, but it requires steps to get there. You can't just drop zero-point tech on the world without the economy and the infrastructure and people's minds ready for it. That's a conversation for another time. It requires steps to get there. And I think a couple of those steps involve space-based solar power, which is super exciting, but that's a video for another time. First step, nuclear. More specifically, SMRs, small modular reactors. In this video, we'll talk about what SMRs are, why they can lead us toward a more decentralized future, some of the propaganda against nuclear, explaining why people don't like it. There's been a lot of propaganda against nuclear over the years, and also draw you a little visual so you can see how SMRs can be deployed and why they're so cool. So a couple of days ago, the Army announced what they're calling the Janus Project. Essentially, the Army, through their Defense Innovation Unit, are going to be working with some contractors to deploy small nuclear micro-reactors at their bases. And they want to do this by 2028. So within the next 3 years, the Army will have a small modular nuclear microreactor powering a base somewhere. Pretty cool, pretty fast, actually. And it might be so fast because back in May, Trump signed an executive order number 14299 that was titled Deploying Advanced Nuclear Technology for National Security Reasons. So Trump, the Trump administration, his shadow advisors, if you will, they know the Green New Deal scam, globalist garbage technology is just that we're doing away with that, which is good. Windmills and the solar panels and all that trash. Oil, gas, coal. Now, Trump, of course, campaigned on drill, baby, drill, which is fine. Opening up the pipelines right now will give us the energy needed to prepare our infrastructure for the future. Future being, in this case, we're talking nuclear, but also the other things like the space-based solar and whatnot. So drill, baby, drill now so we can develop the more advanced stuff for the future. So what's going on is a lot of countries and corporations are looking into SMR, small modular micro-reactors. I believe China just came out with their thorium reactor. We'll talk about thorium in a minute. Russia's looking into it. A ton of tech companies are looking into it. Microsoft, Amazon, bunch of them, because they want to power their data centers. So there's a huge race, big old race going on for SMR development. And the Trump administration is deregulating a lot of things, putting investments into the industry of creating these SMRs. So let's first talk about what an SMR, small modular microreactor, is. So we'll not only talk about what an SMR is, but we'll also discuss here in this segment some of the propaganda against nuclear over the decades and how these SMRs totally changed the game, like destroy all that propaganda and attacks against nuclear. So SMRs are basically small, modular, nuclear micro-reactors. I mean, the Army's been using these things for decades, powering their submarines and aircraft carriers. So we're essentially just taking those, plopping them on land, and powering whatever we need to power, a small city, a factory, what have you, with a micro-reactor. Now, the technologies are a little different than some of the reactors in those submarines and whatnot, different fuel mechanisms, etc. But the military's already been doing it for so long, why not just plop one of those suckers on land? And these things are quite small. They range from, they're probably about the size of a trailer for a semi-truck. And they range anywhere from, they could be as small as 50 megawatt to about 300 megawatts. Now, mind you, 300 megawatts is roughly how much energy one of those large wind farms, like a bigger wind farm, creates. One of those bigger wind farms create anywhere from 200 to 500 megawatts of power. A small modular micro-reactor, about the size of a semi-truck trailer, about 300. They could probably make some larger ones, 500 megawatts. So one of these things, and also your average, to put this into perspective, 1 megawatt can power about 500 to 1,000 homes, depending on, of course, how much energy those homes are using. Homes maybe in the south using AC, or if it's super cold and they need heat, they're going to be using more electricity. But 1 megawatt, roughly 500 to 1,000 homes. So one of these small modular micro-reactors could power maybe 200 to 300,000 homes, right? You also have to account office buildings and factories and other things, but a couple of these small micro-reactors could power a medium-sized city. If not, get a handful of them to power a large city. So the capability here is incredible. They're quite small, and since they're modular, you don't have to create those giant nuclear reactors that you think of from like The Simpsons or the 1970s with the giant steam stacks that cost $1 billion, $5 billion. Since these are modular and they can just come off an assembly line, that greatly reduces the cost. And that's one of the attacks against nuclear for so many decades, is that it costs so much. One of those giant reactors costs $1 billion. Oh, now it's $5, now it's $10 billion. One of the reasons it costs so damn much is all the government regulation. I would imagine there are a lot of lobbyists for the oil, gas, and coal industry that have been lobbying the government for all those decades, trying to force the regulations on the nuclear industry to subvert the competition. Also, some of those green energy climate activists, NGOs, and groups, they're very anti-nuclear too. Greenpeace, very anti-nuclear, which, if they want to reduce carbon emissions, why not go nuclear? I think it's a globalist setup. They lobby from the oil, gas, coal industry. They run propaganda from the climate change activists, all to attack nuclear. So the cost is not as much of a factor anymore. Deregulate brings cost down. Make these things modular, coming off an assembly line, brings costs way down. And then the safety. It's been another attack against nuclear for how many decades? People see Chernobyl or Fukushima and they think, oh my gosh, meltdowns or weapons. We don't want to develop nuclear because maybe some terrorists could get their hands on the enriched uranium and make a weapon out of it. Well, we got an answer for that now. So first off, if you actually look at the deaths of different energy industries, nuclear is one of the smallest ones. Way more people have died in the oil, gas, coal industry over the decades than nuclear. Those meltdowns people are so scared of, I think have been way sensationalized for propagandist purposes. So people think nuclear is so dangerous and oh my gosh, we're all going to die. Also, we don't really need as much uranium anymore because thorium is a mineral that in these advanced small micro-reactors, number one, creates a lot more energy than uranium actually. Thorium is a much more abundant mineral in the Earth, there's huge deposits in India. There's huge deposits of thorium actually on the border of Idaho and Montana in the States here. There's a lot of thorium on this planet. Thorium is way more difficult to enrich into the uranium isotope needed for a nuclear weapon. So thorium, you can't really make a bomb out of it. It's way more abundant. You actually get more energy than uranium. And then there's a lot of new technologies to cool these microreactors with molten salt. Molten salt thorium small nuclear microreactor. So the safety is, I guess you could say, it's gone up, or the danger has gone down. So all that old propaganda from nuclear is, with the advancements of thorium, molten salt cooling, how small these things are getting, it's really becoming incredible. These are going to be amazing. Powering a town or a data center. We're not going to need those giant ugly windmills all across the killing birds and insects all across the countryside. We won't need the hydroelectric dams. We won't need the dams anymore screwing up with the salmon spawning. And we won't need oil, gas, coal as well. So this is an amazing step. The small modular reactors. Let us also discuss, let me actually draw you a picture so you can kind of visualize how these SMRs will decentralize our energy grid. All right, so bear with my mediocre artwork. This is my drawing of the Pacific Northwest. I'm using the Northwest as an example because I've driven all over it. It's where I'm from. It's what I'm familiar with. So in the Pacific Northwest, most of the energy comes from hydroelectric dams. About 50% of the energy from Washington, Idaho, and Oregon come from hydroelectric, which is because of the elevation. There's a lot more potential energy from the Columbia River and these rivers that are coming from high elevations. The water's rushing down and they create a bunch of dams. Much more potential energy than, say, the Mississippi flat river that doesn't have much elevation change over the course of its flow. So there's a bunch of dams along the Columbia River here that snakes up this way, along the Snake River as well. Dams. There's a bunch here in Oregon. There's a few up here in the Cascades and the Olympics. Bunch of hydroelectric dams. Now the thing is that when you generate the electricity, I think the Grand Coulee Dam here on the Columbia in Washington's the biggest, and I think they get like 2,500 megawatts from that, which is like what? 8 micro-reactors. When they get the electricity from these dams, then they have to use transmission wires and cross hundreds and hundreds of miles of forest and mountain passes to get that electricity to cities where it needs to go. So they're cutting down many miles of square forest and having to deal with the building and maintaining of all of those transmission wires from hydroelectric. Similar thing with windmill power. So there's a few windmill farms in the Pacific Northwest. Most of the windmill farms in this country are in the Midwest, Texas and up through the Midwest there, but there's a few large farms like out here in Oregon. There's a few smaller ones over by like Yakima and Wenatchee. When I'm driving, I see a few across the countryside here. I think a few more in Oregon this way, but the biggest one, most of the windmills in the Pacific Northwest are about right here in eastern Oregon, just south of the Columbia here. I think your average windmill generates like, your windmill farm generates 300 to 500 megawatts, the big ones. I think one windmill is like 3 to 5 megawatts. So, same thing. You get the windmill, which only works when wind is going, right? Big problem. But then you also have the transmission wires that need to get that electricity where it needs to go. Same thing with oil. You got these pipelines that need to cross states and countries to develop that oil. You also have all the tankers that need to come in to develop that, wherever the tankers come in and dock. Then you have to refine that at the big refineries. And then transmission wires, same thing, that need to go from those refineries to wherever that electricity needs to go. Now, instead of all those frickin' pipelines and transmission wires, the refineries you need, the big ugly windmills, all those dams that, how much damage do those dams do to the environment, to the salmon spawning and all that. Instead of all those transmission wires and pipelines, just imagine you plug in, like, let's take Seattle, for instance. I think I did the math. For the whole country, we would need, if we're going with the 300 megawatt SMRs, we would just need a few thousand of them. Few thousand. But we could plug in a couple of those small micro-reactors around the city, and we don't need those transmission wires going across the forest, across the mountains for hundreds and hundreds of miles. We don't need those pipelines bringing the oil in for the energy anymore, or those big ugly refineries taking up how much space. I mean, think of all the square miles that the dams and the windmill farms and the transmission wires and everything takes. We don't need all that space anymore. Solar panels as well. Solar panels, when they're on the ground, you can't farm anything under that. Like that ground is useless. So you're taking up how many square miles for these big solar farms? Useless ground. At least under the windmills, you can still use that for grazing land or what have you, but there are lots of birds that get killed by those windmills. So for the sustainable, gotta save the environment people, it's really fucking weird that they love solar and windmills. Now put those solar panels in space and beam that energy to the ground with radio waves. That's a whole different story, but video for another time. These SMRs, small micro-reactors, hey, you got ugly-ass Portland there. We could just plug a few SMRs around it. Spokane here, just plug a few SMRs over there. Over here in Boise, wherever you need them, right? And then you might need a few miles of transmission wires, sure, to get it to the neighborhoods and the big city, but I would rather deal with 10 to 20 miles of transmission wires than 500 freaking miles or some long-ass pipeline. So the transmission wires become so much more localized. The energy generation becomes so much more localized, much more decentralized. So, you just have a few plugged in around your major cities, wherever you need them. Oh, here's a couple cities over here in Oregon, maybe around Pendleton or LeGrand. Oh, let's just need one each. Maybe we need a few dozen of them around Seattle, Portland, something like that, right? You get the picture. And these things are small, like tractor trailer sized, and they're safe, thorium, and molten salt cooling. And then right around here, so to get that thorium, right around here in the Lemmy Pass, about this region between Montana and Idaho, there is shitloads of thorium, ton of thorium. So instead of having to mine the guts of the earth for all that coal, all that oil, you don't have to mine as much space either, or use as much space for the windmills. And the amount of rare earth material needed for those solar panels and those windmills as well, the amount of mining we need to do to create SMRs, much, much less. Much less. So the big thorium deposits here in Idaho, the Idaho National Laboratory, which is about right there, they're actually doing a bunch of, just a month or two ago, there's a report that came out that they're working with a company to test their thorium SMR technology with great success, like huge amounts of energy. I think just 1 ton of thorium produced a gigawatt, which is a lot. And I believe the US's deposits of thorium are like 800,000 tons. India, I believe, has some of the largest deposits in the world. They got like 1 million tons of it. And 1 ton of thorium gives you a gigawatt for 1 year. So there's a huge amount of potential energy unlocked in thorium SMRs. So that's kind of the brief about it. Is it the best we can do? No, it's just one option. One option to decentralize things, and then we could plug in other options later, like a space-based solar or something over Unity or what have you. 0 point energy, free energy, whatever. But for the first step away from Green New Deal scam tech and centralized archaic oil, gas, coal tech, which, sorry, oil, gas, coal is not that good. It's not that efficient. And you need all these wires and all that. Controlled explosions, man. So radioactive rocks, way more efficient, way more better than controlled explosions or windmill turbines. So it's the first step away from what we have now to a much more advanced, decentralized future. Space-based solar will decentralize everything even further, and then, who knows, let your imagination run wild from there. So SMRs, small modular reactors, Army's going to have their first one out in 3 years. I imagine these tech companies are just dying. They're dying to develop and come out with an SMR, which they are. I mean, Microsoft and Amazon and a lot of these big tech companies, they're heavily looking at small nuclear microreactors and space-based solar and probably other things too. But I imagine, Army's coming out with one in 3 years. Within 5 to 10 years, we'll probably be seeing these small microreactors start to get plugged in different states, around large cities. I believe in Tennessee, they're actually in the process of building one right now. I think in Wyoming, they're building one too. So some projects are already starting. Give it 5 to 10 years, and I think a good amount of our electricity will start to be coming from these small micro reactors. And with the military application, right? So say they got a base way out here in the Pacific or wherever, Diego Garcia or Hawaii or what have you. If they just plug in a microreactor at that forward operating base or whatever Navy or Air Force or Army base, they don't need to be shipping all the freaking oil and gas and whatever to power the thing anymore. All that power is just coming from their microreactor that they plugged in right next to it. So, or you could, like Russia's done this. Russia has a ship that has a nuclear microreactor on it. So you could just bring that ship over to your base or over to wherever and plug that in, and that's your electricity is coming right there. So yeah, this is actually really exciting stuff. And I think within the next 10 years, we're going to see a massive change in how we power our world. So, fun times.